Good morning. All right, so reading Genesis. Yesterday we read about the lineage of Adam after Seth, and it was very interesting how it also talked about Enoch. And now, having known that there is a book of Enoch, because it read in Enoch, it stated that God had took him, and there's a whole book on Enoch. I haven't read it yet. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to reading it. And so I'm not going to read it out of order. I'm going to read it things in order. And it's like I'm actually learning and relearning myself. And so I'm excited to sit here and to be able to share this learning with you. Any revelation you get, anything you want to share, please do comment. Absolutely. I don't know everything. So that's how knowledge is acquired. It's shared, and that's how come there's also so much misinformation, because the Western theology just took over. And so I'm not saying that those folks are wrong, but what I know one thing is that a lot of things that they're doing is not right, so I'm just so happy that understanding that there is another theology, an Eastern theology, that goes into more in-depth, because it has more Bibles of the books. So some of them questions that, people may have had, well, what about this? Like yesterday was asking, well, do you believe that it's possible that Adam and Eve populated the earth and stuff like that? And wondering if there's more books. And the thing about it is that there's also the book of Jubilees, and Jubilees is considered to be like a little Genesis. And so I'm excited to get to read Jubilees and to hear what kind of, what revelation I could get from that to further help me with understanding the book of Genesis, and hearing things from the perspective of how God reveals himself to that author. So this is really exciting, to know that, that all this time under our noses, there wasn't just this Western theology that's been, as a person who attended a Christian university, for nothing about Ethiopia to be mentioned, and for all of this other stuff to be mentioned, the Septuagint and all this stuff, it's just amazing, that this man, Haile Selassie, is not talked about. And it just makes it all real to me, the wickedness that went about the world to make it seem like the black man was the heathen, when in reality, black people was just as various, or just as, what's the right word, we varied in different peoples. Different groups, different peoples, different traditions, different beliefs, different ways of life. And the only thing that we shared in common was that we were on the same continent and we were of darker skin. Other than that, a lot of us ain't had nothing else in common, but because of slavery and because of racism that was introduced, they kind of mixed us all together in the slave trade, and that's also ensured that we would lose our culture, mixing us all together. We didn't know one another, didn't speak the same language. We got all separated and stuff like that, and brought ashore to America when you gave birth to a child. The child was ripped out of your hands, and it was sold, and the discourse today is that, well, get over it. That happened, but the reality is that all of that stuff that happened still affects us today, because a lot of black people still don't know their history. They don't know their history because it was stolen from them when they were kidnapped. They were kidnapped. When a person is kidnapped, that means that they are taken against their will from one place to another. And with that, they lost their culture, they lost their way of life, they lost everything that they knew, and they ended up having to forge their own in a foreign land. And forging their own, a lot of people took on what the master taught, and a lot of people wanted to seek and learn their own. There's you know, different leaders that we've had that had different ways of different revelations from God. Marcus Garvey was one. All of them were murdered. You know, they murdered all of our leaders who were trying to find culture, trying to find and discover who we were in America and in the Caribbeans and all of us abroad. You know, even Africa is colonizers. I just see a lot of Africans who believe that it was the white folks who came and brought Jesus to them, you know, and saved them from whatever it was that they were going through at the time, when it's like that's just not how it was. It's like Jesus was already in Africa. Black folks already knew about Africa. Not all of them, but there are some, you know what I mean, since the 4th century, maybe even before that, Jesus was in Africa. Matthew, the Apostle Matthew, was Ethiopian, according to some things that I had read. And so either he was Ethiopian or he went back to Ethiopia to preach over there. But nonetheless, Ethiopia became a Christian state. And before it was a Christian state, it was a Jewish state through Queen of Sheba, Queen Makeda. And Queen Makeda, a lot of Arabs say that she was Arabian, but they have no proof. They have no lineage of her. The Ethiopians have lineage of Queen of Sheba all the way to Haile Selassie, His Imperial Majesty the First, who died in 1974. That's a long lineage from the Queen of Sheba all the way to him. They have a count every name of every person who reigned and how long they reigned. I mean, and that's something else to want to have to read and explore, is the history of Ethiopia, because it's the only country that wasn't colonized. They were overran by the Derg, I believe their name is called, and Mussolini and a lot of that, you know, where His Imperial Majesty was outed, and he was exiled, you know, and there really isn't much to you know, that I talked about him. I believe that there's a movie that's going to be coming out on YouTube that's going to talk about His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie. But this is important for all people, all Christians, because the Western theology is based off of the Protestant theory. Those folks went out murdering folks. The Catholic theory is based off of Roman mythology, and it's all been whitewashed. Now look, I'm not saying I have nothing bad to say about anybody who believes those traditions. That do you. I'm talking about for me and for people like me who believe that God is more than what we've been told. You know, because God is more than what we've been told. And so now that black people are at a position where we can go out there and we can seek knowledge and learn on our own, there's no longer the chains or shackle, have a shackle. Now information is able to be shared. We're able to, a lot of us are now able to make money where we can go abroad and we can learn about these things. That's how I found out about Haile Selassie. I was being abroad. I didn't know nothing about him being in America and being educated, having a master's degree and everything. Went to a Christian university, and I knew nothing about this man, not until I went abroad. And there's so much more to learn. I wish I could go to Ethiopia, you know, to learn more. But nonetheless, we'll see what God will have in store. I know that Ethiopia, God has had his eye on Ethiopia for a long time. God has had his hand on Ethiopia. She was never colonized. The folks in Ethiopia are doing something right according to the laws, religions, and customs, and covenants, and commandments of God. They have not been endured the extent of the wickedness that many of us have endured due to colonialism and racism. Now, I'm not saying that Ethiopia hasn't had their share of wars and history and whatnot, but I do know is that they were not colonized, so that allows me to believe that they weren't whitewashed. Now, I know that Ethiopia and Egypt and Rome. Rome tried to invade itself onto Ethiopia, and Ethiopia resisted. God must have had his hand on Ethiopia. He must have. For them to be the only country on the whole continent to be able to resist colonization, the efforts of the enemy to try to come in and to take their people and take their lands. You know, now some of us from Ethiopia, and I say us because I'm here, I'm Jamaican, so hey, but we were stolen. But imagine a kingdom so big and vast, and imagine many of us, even the Igbos of Nigeria, so many different groups of black folks were Jewish, were followers of Yahshua, and what they call, you know, and it's just so much of our history was just stolen from us, you know. And so, yeah, let's get down to the reading of Genesis chapter 6.